The Lifestyle Show, presented by Selina Mackenzie.
Do you always show up for everyone else, get praised for your strength, and look like you have it all together while secretly experiencing intense worry and self-doubt? Well, if this sounds like you might want to listen to our first guest of the day, here to tell us about high-functioning anxiety, a 5-step guide to calming the inner panic and thriving. Please welcome to the show, Dr. Lalitaa Suglani.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're more than welcome. So those are the symptoms, are they? What does it mean, high-functioning anxiety?
So the way that I always explain high-functioning anxiety is a bit like the swan analogy. So when we see the swan, we see the top half and it looks like it's really graceful. It looks like it's got it all together, but sort of underneath it's paddling along. And the way that I usually describe that is the swan looks like it's organized. It looks like it appears calm. It's quite hardworking. It's got it all together. It's meeting all the deadlines. It's proactive, sociable. But on the inside, what's really going on for people? And what is really happening that we're not really showing the world around us. And often this is we have perfectionist traits. We are excessively worrying. We're catastrophizing. We might be feeling quite burnt out, but no one sees this. We might be feeling inadequate. We have that imposter syndrome sitting on our shoulder, criticizing everything that we do. We feel quite lonely and disconnected from the world around us. And that's the way I would describe what high functioning anxiety, or how we can show up if we do have high functioning anxiety.
Yeah, it sort of resonates. It feels to me like a lot of us, I don't know what the statistics are, but a lot of us will probably have HFA or high functioning anxiety.
Definitely. And the more people I speak to, they'll start off and they'll be like, well, I don't have that. But when you break it down and help people to understand what's really going on and the patterns that we might be presenting with, people are like, oh my God, that's a thing. Other people go through this. And it's a real shock and revelation when people realize that this is something that might be going on. It's because it's not a diagnosis of some sort, but it's something that we can relate to help us understand why we might be presenting in this way.
So can you go through the 5 steps to us then?
Yeah. So for me, the first step is becoming more aware. So the first step is all about becoming more aware of what are these symptoms? What are the triggers? Because if we're not aware of why we're showing up the way that we are, how can we possibly help ourselves? So for me, it's like, let's just take a moment and understand what are these patterns that are showing up and start understanding this shadow part of us or the hidden part of us. And that hidden part is almost if we again use the swan analogy, is what is, or how is it that we're paddling? Why are we ignoring that part of us? And why do we struggle to show that part to others? So what we just, or the book takes us through, and the first step is all about understanding what is HFA and understanding how our sensitivity can stop us from showing up, all parts of us. Then we move on to step 2, which is about breaking down this pattern and uncovering why is it that we've developed this pattern? Where does it come from? Because it's all about our safety, our security. And once upon a time, we would have been a young child, and that young child would have found a way to keep itself safe. And that pattern develops into our adulthood. And parts of us where we have suppressed away or we've ignored, that's step 2. It's about uncovering and understanding why is it that we are a people pleaser? Why is it that we're a perfectionist? Why is it that we feel that we have to please everyone else and take on everyone else's emotions? So there's a reason for that. And it's not going back and blaming our parents or our attachments, but it's about going back and understanding what are the beliefs that I learned from my young, or being that young child, and why is it that I feel safe being this way? And then we move to step 3, which is where we enter the learning stage. So step 1 and step 2 is all about unlearning, going back and unlearning. But step 3 to me is about really starting to self-connect. And I say self-connect is because in the past, it may have been that you're living externally, so focused on everyone else and everyone else's needs. But it's now, how do you learn to understand what your needs are? How do you learn to make sense of what your sensitivity is always or has been screaming at you all your life, but you've just not had the tools to be able to manage it? And then step 4 is all about embracing that sensitivity that you have and understanding what self-trust means to you, because there's so many of us that don't trust ourselves and we keep giving our power away to so many other people. But we also need to understand, like, why is that? Where does that come from? And actually sensitivity is not a bad thing. And we're often shamed away for feeling a certain emotion or getting upset over something because people tell us that it's a bad thing, that you shouldn't be feeling this way. And we just end up suppressing. But step 4 to me is really embracing that sensitivity and stepping into your self-trust, because no matter what happens, you've got your back and you will figure it out and find a way. And then we move to step 5, which is all about self-compassion. And self-compassion is about, how do we accept ourselves? How do we love ourselves? How do we truly give ourselves the love that we give to everyone else? And how do we honor that within ourselves? And I go through 12 powers that we can take with us into life, and how we can navigate life with these 12 powers and really truly feel what our needs are and be able to communicate that to the world around us.
Yeah, it's the old adage, isn't it, that you've got to love yourself first before you can expect anyone else to love you.
Definitely. It's like that oxygen mask analogy is,
yes,
if you're in
on
a plane,
flight,
you need to put that oxygen mask on yourself, because otherwise how can you support others if you're not filling up your own glass and you're not looking after yourself?
And these steps all sound very good and very valid, but is it hard to change your mind process? Does it take quite a while to do?
I think everyone's different. And sometimes I know a lot of people that I've spoken to, they're like, but I don't want to get rid of the anxiety. How else am I going to be successful? And how else am I going to get things done? And I'm saying you can still have the high functioning, but come from a place of intention. And when you're navigating, because what you're ultimately trying to do is navigate big emotions like shame, guilt, that once upon a time you've not known how to manage or regulate. So when you're regulating them now, of course, there's going to be situations where you might be implementing a boundary and someone else around you is feeling a little bit upset or they're annoyed at you for doing or saying this. And in that sort of decision-making process, you have a choice. Do I continue keeping this boundary, or do I quickly reverse back and fall back into my patterns? But whatever you decide is always learning. So it's not that, okay, I'm going to have these tools and everything's going to be perfect for me for the rest of my life. It's more that you've got these tools and they become tools to help you navigate life, but we don't know what's going to come up in life. But everything that does come up, it's a learning for you. You're not running away from yourself anymore. You're just learning to understand, like, if someone in the coffee shop looks at me in a certain way, you're not personalizing it and thinking, I'm a bad person. I must have upset them. I must have said something wrong. You're able to communicate and even just have a conversation with that person. Say, is everything okay? Just to make sure that you're honoring your power and you're showing up as your true self.
Yeah, I remember talking to somebody once and they were saying that they got, I don't know what the official term is, but they got poor me syndrome. And anything that happened, it was a guy actually, very brave for coming forward, but he said anything that happens, if something goes wrong, I always think, oh my God, it's me, as opposed to, well, actually it was their fault. It wasn't my fault at all.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like, why is it that we do that? Why do we take on all this responsibility? And often it's because it goes back into our inner child and the beliefs that we would have learned that I'm the problem. And that's the same belief then that fuels everything. So you could be sat in a work meeting and you've done your work and you've done what you've done, and someone else has said, well, why hasn't this been done? And instantly it's like, oh, I should have done this and I should have done this. And you end up just beating yourself up for something that isn't even your fault.
Yeah, yeah. And do you think, Lalita, that it's a lot to do with the world that we live in now? I mean, 20 or 30 years ago, would we have, generally high functioning anxiety? Is it different today?
I think it can be different today because of what we see and what we perceive in the world around us. I think it's always been there for people. But I do feel like now, like when we look on Instagram, when we look on TikTok and we see other people, we create our own narrative. And we live in a world where everything needs to be perfect, or we need to be successful, we need to be happy. And we always put on this mask, or we feel we need to perform to fit in. And we can't talk about deep things, or we can't talk about being upset because other people, they don't want to see that, or they don't know how to handle that. So we create a narrative that it's not okay for me to bring that side of me up. I need to keep showing up this way because that's what other people are going to accept. But then we also need to understand that, yes, we're trying to fit in, but what about the other parts of ourselves? And we're denying ourselves really room to show up as our true self because we're so focused on what people think. And I feel like that's always been there, but it's just showing up in a very different way in where we are right now in society.
Yeah. I think this imposter syndrome, I think it's such a shame because there are some massively talented people out there and, you know, you hear of them with imposter syndrome. They're thinking, well, actually, you know, everyone thinks I am, but really I'm not. And it's wrong. That's again putting pressure and anxiety onto yourself.
Yeah, it's so sad, isn't it? Like so many people are so brilliant at what they do, but they just don't see it themselves. And what they end up doing is they keep pushing themselves and pushing themselves and pushing themselves because one person may have said something like, oh, is that all you did today? Or and that's it. We don't focus on the compliments because we don't know how to hold or take on the compliments. But actually, it's not a battle with the world around us. Often the imposter syndrome is about how we relate to ourselves. So if we don't like who we are going to keep pushing ourselves and thinking that we need to keep doing more and more and more. But that's just an avoidance of sitting with ourselves. And sometimes it's because we don't know how to sit with ourselves and we don't know how to love ourselves because every time maybe growing up, we've done something. It's like, yep, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. And we've developed that belief that we are not enough. So we keep pushing and pushing and pushing to prove to ourselves essentially that, see, I'm enough. But it's short term, it's short lived. And the real work needs to happen when we fully embody what enough means and how we feel enough within ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I know that you're a psychologist, but is this just from a professional point of view, this book, or is some of it from a personal point of view?
No, so it's from a personal point of view as well. And I talk a lot about it in the book and my own experience, growing up in a, sort of a culture where it's like, right, what's the next thing, and not really understanding, how or what's going on within the world within myself rather than we're so focused on, okay, right, you've gone to school, right, okay, now you need to go to uni, you need to do this, and it's getting or using the external world to feel enough. But often that comes from, and when I've gone into my own sort of story and understood my own story, it comes from culture. So I'm second generation in the UK. My dad was born in India. And his way, or he came into this country very much in survival mode. So he wanted to give the best to his kids. He wanted to give the best to his family. And that meant giving his family things that he wasn't able to have or things that he wasn't able to get. But by doing that, it wasn't focusing on the needs of the child. It's more focused on what you should be doing because that's what the community expect of you. And if you don't follow through this path, the shame that comes up, like you're not following through with everyone else. But I'm so blessed and grateful that my path has allowed me to unfold all of these learnings because that's given me the space to be able to also connect and help others to make sense of what's gone on for them.
Yeah, I do believe that it's one thing being trained and being a professional, but if you've been through something yourself, you have more empathy and understanding, don't you?
Definitely. And everyone's journey is very different into HFA. And that's another thing is like, it's using the science behind it. It's using people's journeys. But I also feel like sometimes when you're sitting with a professional and you feel like they may not understand, but when you feel like they've gone through this, they get it. It helps you then to feel like, okay, I'm not alone in this. And it's not just a roadmap because everyone's journey into the healing of HFA is also very different.
Yeah. Is this your first book, Lalita?
Yeah, this is my first book.
Well done.
I'm currently writing my second book as well. So I'm really excited to just see what mark HFA has. Because the messages that I get from people, they honestly, they really touch my heart. People saying that they can't believe that they've been to therapy for years and years, but reading my book has allowed them to just realize this is what they've been trying to communicate to the world around them, but not having the right words in the book, giving them that.
Well, I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people. And we are selling it right now on our website, tre.radio. It's called High Functioning Anxiety, a 5-step guide to calming the inner panic and thriving. It's by Dr. Lalitaa Suglani, who we're speaking to now. And Lalita, do you have your own website as well, if people want to find out more about you?
Yeah, so my website is www.drdoctor, and then it's Lalita with double A at the end. So it's LALITAA.com. And you can also find me on Instagram, which is at dr.lalita, and you'll find me there.
Lovely. Well, it's been great to chat to you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.